She arrived with nothing but a broken name. He was just trying to fix a deck. Neither one knew they were about to rebuild each other. Before she stepped out of that black car with swollen eyes and a phone still buzzing with headlines calling her a fraud, before a carpenter in faded jeans looked up from a rotting plank and saw a woman the whole country was laughing at, neither one of them believed anything good was coming. She had lost everything in 48 hours. He had been quietly losing himself for 5 years, and the deck between them was more broken than either of them could see. If you want to know how two strangers ended up rebuilding the wrong things first and the right things last, stay with me until the very end. Drop a like if you've ever had to start over from nothing, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from so I can see just how far this story has traveled. The road out to Harlow Lake was the kind of road that forgot people on purpose. Caleb Morgan drove it in a 12-year-old Ford pickup that rattled every time he crossed the cattle guard 2 miles back, and he hadn't bothered to fix the rattle because his son liked it. Oliver, strapped into the booster seat beside him, was 6 years old and missing a front tooth and absolutely certain that the rattle was a dragon living under the hood. Caleb had stopped arguing with him about it around March. "Dad?" "Yeah, bud." "Can the dragon come inside the house when we get there?" "It's not our house, Ollie. We're just working." "But can it?" Caleb glanced over. Oliver had his nose pressed against the window, a peanut butter smudge on his cheek from breakfast in Madison, a stuffed fox he called Mr. Pete, clutched against his chest like the thing might evaporate. Caleb's chest did the familiar tightening it had been doing for 5 years, the one that hit him every time his son looked too much like his mother. "Tell you what," he said. "The dragon can sit on the porch." "Deal." It was late September and the trees along the gravel road had started to give up. Gold and rust and a few stubborn greens holding on out of spite. Caleb had grown up in towns like the one Harlow Lake wasn't quite part of. Towns where the word estate meant something different than it did out here. Out here, estate meant some rich family from Chicago had bought 20 acres in a crooked old lake house in 1987 and then mostly forgotten it existed. The friend who'd called him was named Dale, and Dale was the closest thing Caleb had to family that wasn't technically family. They'd grown up 2 streets apart. Dale had married a nurse, moved out to run his father-in-law's property management company, and called Caleb 6 days ago, sounding like a man trying very hard not to sound desperate. "I've got a client," Dale had said. "Owner of the Bennett place out by Harlow. Deck's rotted out worse than we thought. Whole west side framing, probably. I need a guy I trust, Cale. I've got 3 other jobs I can't walk away from. 4 days, maybe 5, double rate. You bring Ollie, you stay in the guest house. Nobody bothers you." "Who's the client?" There had been a pause on Dale's end that Caleb hadn't liked. "It's a situation," Dale had said finally. "Lady who owns it, she's having a rough patch. She's going to be there, but she's not going to be, around. She asked for privacy. I told her I'd send somebody who wouldn't what? Wouldn't make it a thing." Caleb had taken the job because the rent on the little house in Madison was due in 12 days, and because Ollie needed new shoes, and because he had no particular interest in whatever rough patch a lake house owner in Wisconsin was having. He did not read celebrity news. He did not own a television. He barely owned a working phone. He was a man who had built his life very deliberately around not making anything a thing. He turned off the gravel road onto a narrower one, and the narrower one onto a driveway flanked by 2 fieldstone pillars with the name Bennett carved into a cedar plaque that had weathered almost to illegibility. The driveway wound through pines for maybe a quarter mile before the house came into view. Caleb whistled low. "Is that our house?" Oliver said. "Nope." "It's bigger than our house." "Most things are, bud." It wasn't a mansion, exactly. It was long and low and made of dark-stained cedar and river stone, built into the slope so that the back of it hung out over the lake on a set of pilings. And Caleb's eye went to it immediately, professional reflex. A deck. A big one, wrapping the whole lake-facing side. Even from the driveway, he could see the warp in the boards, the sag near the northwest corner, the way one of the railings tilted out over the water like a drunk at last call. "That's going to be a job," he said, mostly to himself. He parked behind a small Honda with Illinois plates and a sleek black sedan that did not look like it belonged in a place with this much gravel. A golden retriever came loping around the side of the house, barking without much conviction. tail going. Oliver was out of the truck before Caleb could stop him, already on his knees in the dirt, already in love. Dog, Dad, dog. Gentle hands, bud. The front door opened. A woman in her 50s stepped out, wiping her hands on a dishcloth, and Caleb relaxed a fraction because she looked like somebody's mother. Gray hair in a braid, round face, jeans, and a flannel. "You must be Caleb," she said. "I'm Margie. I keep house for the Bennetts. Dale said you'd be in around 3, and it's 20 to 4, so he was close for once." She smiled at Oliver. "And who's this little man?" "Oliver," Oliver said, without looking up from the dog. "Well, Oliver, that's Biscuit, and Biscuit has been waiting all day for a friend his own size, so I'd say you two are in business." Margie looked back at Caleb. "Guest house is down that path there. It's got 2 bedrooms, a kitchenette, nothing fancy. I left groceries. There's mac and cheese and some of that dinosaur chicken for the boy. I wasn't sure what he'd eat." "You didn't have to do that." "Oh, honey, I have 4 grandkids. I have dinosaur chicken PTSD. Caleb smiled. It felt a little rusty. He hadn't smiled at a stranger in a while. "Miss Bennett's home," Margie said, and something in her voice shifted, got careful. She's keeping to herself. The East Wing, that's hers, and the little reading room off the back. She asked me to pass along that she'd like you to just, work. She doesn't want to be, entertained. Or entertaining. Understood. She's going through some things. None of my business." Margie looked at him for a second longer than he expected, like she was deciding something. "You're a quiet one," she said. "Dale said you would be. Dale talks enough for both of us." That got a real laugh out of her. The guest house was a single long cabin with a tin roof and a screened-in porch, and a view of the lake through a gap in the trees. Caleb unloaded the truck while Oliver chased Biscuit in circles, and by the time he had the tools locked in the storage shed and the groceries put away, and Oliver's dinosaur on the counter next to Oliver's toothbrush, the light was starting to go the color of a bruise. He made mac and cheese. Oliver ate 3 bites and then fell asleep sitting up on the couch with Mr. Pete under his chin. Caleb carried him to the bed in the smaller room, took his shoes off, tugged a blanket over him, and stood there for a minute the way he always stood there, watching his son's chest rise and fall and feeling the old, stupid fear that it might stop. It wouldn't. It hadn't. For 5 years it hadn't. But he still watched. He went back out to the porch with a beer he didn't really want and sat on the step and looked at the lake through the pines. The water was black and flat. Somewhere across it, a loon was doing its lonely thing. Caleb had spent a lot of evenings on a lot of porches, exactly like this one over the last 5 years. It was starting to feel like the shape of his life. Build something during the day, sit on a step at night, wake up, do it again. He was 32 years old, and he felt like a man much older and much tireder. And he was mostly okay with that because tired was easier than the alternative. He didn't hear her walk up. "Excuse me," he turned his head. A woman was standing about 10 feet from the porch in the dim, arms crossed tight against her body, hair pulled back in a way that looked like she'd done it in the dark without a mirror. She was in an oversized sweatshirt and leggings, and she had no shoes on, which was the first thing Caleb noticed, because it was maybe 50 degrees out. Her feet were bare in the pine needles. "You're the carpenter." "Yeah." He stood up. "Caleb, sorry, I didn't—" "Your dog was barking." "He's not my dog. He's Biscuit, right? Margie's dog, I think." "Oh." She looked like she'd been ready for an argument and now didn't know where to put it. "Right, Margie's." She was younger than he'd pictured. When Dale had said lady who owns it, Caleb had assumed some 50-something with a second husband and a gin habit. This woman couldn't have been much more than 28, 29, and under the sweatshirt she had the kind of posture that came from having been told her whole life to stand up straight. Her face in the porch light was tired in the specific way Caleb recognized. The tired that wasn't about sleep. "I'm Isla Bennett," she said. "This is my house. I wasn't expecting. I thought you'd start tomorrow." "I am starting tomorrow, just getting settled." "Right." She nodded too many times. "Right, of course." There was a silence. She didn't leave. Caleb didn't know what she was waiting for, so he waited with her. "Your son," she said finally. "Margie said you brought your son." "Yeah, he's asleep. I hope that's—" It's fine, I just—" She pressed the heel of her hand against her forehead. I didn't know. Dale didn't say. I just want to make sure he's, away from the deck. The deck isn't safe. I'll keep him away from the deck. The railings. I know. I'm not trying to tell you how to. It's your house. You can tell me whatever you want. She looked at him then. Actually looked. For the first time since she'd walked up, her face was still long enough for him to see it, and what he saw in it surprised him, because it wasn't the sharp boardroom face Dale had implied. It was the face of a person who had recently been hit very hard and was still, at that moment, deciding whether to stay standing. I'm going to go back inside, she said. Okay, please don't, if you see me, on the property. Please don't feel like you have to make conversation. I won't. Thank you. She turned and walked back up the path toward the house, barefoot on the pine needles, and Caleb watched her go because there was something wrong about the way she was walking. Not wrong like hurt. Wrong like someone who had forgotten what her body was for. He sat back down on the step. The beer had gone warm. None of my business, he told Margie in his head. None of my business. Well, Isla did not sleep that night. She had not slept, really, in 4 days, which was the number of days since a blog with 2.8 million subscribers had run a story with her face on it and the headline, Bennett Betrayed, Tech Wonder Girl's fiancé caught in second affair as wedding collapses. The phrase Wonder Girl was what had broken her, not the affair. The affair she had, on some level she was not ready to examine, already known about for weeks. Not even the second, because there had been a first one, 6 months ago, which she had swallowed and forgiven and filed away under the heading of things successful women tolerate. It was the phrase Wonder Girl that had undone her, because Isla Bennett was 29 years old and the CEO of a health data platform valued at $340 million, and she had put 22,000 hours of her life into that number. And they had reduced her to Wonder Girl, like she was a pop song. She sat on the floor of her bedroom at 3 a.m., with her back against the bed frame and her phone face down because she had been trying, for 6 minutes, not to pick it up. She picked it up. 47 new notifications. 2 from her mother, 3 from the board, 1 from a reporter at Bloomberg who had been cordial and now was not, and a string from her PR firm with subject lines like urgent, response options attached, and please call me back, Isla, please. The name on the screen that made her stomach turn over was still saved as David. She hadn't been able to bring herself to delete the heart. That, she thought, was maybe the most embarrassing thing about the whole situation. Not the articles, not the viral tweet from his other girlfriend, not the leaked photos from the hotel in Austin. It was the heart. It was the fact that a woman who could negotiate a Series B round could not, at 3 a.m, find the thumb strength to remove one small red emoji from a contact name. She put the phone down. She got up. She went to the kitchen. She poured a glass of water and stood at the window over the sink and looked out at the dark shape of the guest house through the trees, and she thought about the man on the porch. He had not recognized her. She was almost certain of it. There had been no flicker, no widening of the eyes, no held breath that meant, oh, it's you. He had looked at her like she was the owner of a lake house and nothing else, like a person. Just a person standing in pine needles at night. She couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at her like that. Her fiancé, she realized, ex-fiancé, she corrected herself, the word still tasted like metal, had stopped looking at her like that somewhere around their second anniversary. Her board looked at her like a portfolio. Her mother looked at her like a stock chart. Her assistant looked at her like a weather front. Even her friends, the ones she still had from Stanford, had started, somewhere in the last 3 years, to look at her like they were waiting for her to sit down so they could start the real conversation. The carpenter had looked at her like she was a tired woman in a sweatshirt. She set the water down on the counter harder than she meant to. Outside, the loon cried again. Caleb was up at 6:15 because Oliver was up at 6:15. Dad, the dog is here. He opened his eyes. Biscuit was standing in the bedroom doorway with his entire front half inside and his back half still respectfully in the hall, as if he wasn't sure of the rules. Oliver was standing on the bed. Buddy, off the bed. But the dog is here. He is, off the bed. Oliver got off the bed. Biscuit, taking this as an invitation, came the rest of the way in and put his chin on Caleb's chest. Morning, Caleb said to the dog. The dog thumped his tail. Margie had left coffee grounds and eggs and a loaf of homemade bread wrapped in a dish towel, and Caleb made Oliver scrambled eggs and toast and ate his own standing up at the counter because eating sitting down felt like an indulgence he hadn't earned yet. By 7, he had Oliver in overalls and a flannel shirt and work boots that were too big because Caleb had bought them a size up on purpose. Rules. Don't go near the water, Oliver recited. Don't go near the deck. Don't go in the big house unless Margie says. Don't ask strangers for anything. Good. Can I ask Biscuit for things? Biscuit is not a stranger. Then can I... Boots on, bud. They walked up the path together. The lake, in morning light, was a different thing than it had been the night before, steel-colored and moving, mist coming off it in soft sheets. The house looked bigger in the sun. The deck looked worse. Caleb stood at the edge of it for a full 5 minutes before he touched anything. This was a habit his father had drilled into him when he was 14 and holding a framing hammer for the first time. Look before you swing, boy. Every time, every time. He looked. He saw the rot at the joist hangers on the northwest side. He saw the way the ledger board was pulling away from the house where the flashing had failed a decade ago. He saw the split in the fourth post from the left, hairline, but running the whole length. He saw, with a small internal wince, about $11,000 of materials and 3 weeks of honest work, which was not what Dale had sold him, and he understood suddenly why Dale had wanted somebody he trusted. This thing's held together with prayer, he muttered. Dad said a word, Oliver told Biscuit, seriously. Prayer isn't a bad word. You said it like one. Margie came out the back door with 2 mugs and handed one to Caleb without asking. How bad? It's bad. How bad? Ma'am, you want the honest version or the version that doesn't ruin your morning? Honest. It's held together with prayer and the fear of God. Margie sipped her coffee. She's not going to like that. No, ma'am. You'll have to tell her. I was hoping you might... Oh, no, sir. I cook and I clean and I love that dog. I don't deliver bad news to Isla Bennett. I did that once, about a curtain, and I'm still recovering. Caleb laughed in spite of himself. Noted. She'll be reasonable, Margie said, and then, quieter, she's been reasonable her whole life. That's partly the problem. You know what's going on with her? Dale said a rough patch. Dale is a diplomat. I don't follow the news. Margie studied him. Huh, what? Nothing. That's refreshing is all. You'll figure out who she is or you won't, and either way, don't feel like you need to. She came out here because nobody was supposed to know her out here. She set her mug down on the railing, the good railing, the one that wasn't falling into the lake. I'll tell her you need to talk to her about the deck. Around 11. She's at her worst in the mornings. At her worst how? Margie didn't answer. She just shook her head and walked back into the house. And Caleb looked down at Oliver, who was feeding a piece of toast to Biscuit in defiance of about 4 separate household rules. Rules, bud. He was hungry. He's always hungry. That's his whole personality. At 11 o'clock, Caleb was on his knees on the deck with a pry bar when he felt her come out of the house behind him. He didn't look up right away. He'd spent enough of his life around skittish animals, dogs, horses, his own grief, other people's grief, to know that the trick was to keep doing what you were doing. Let them get used to you. Let them decide the distance. Margie said you needed to talk to me. Yes, ma'am. Don't call me ma'am. Sorry. She came around to his left side and stopped at the edge of the good boards. She was wearing actual shoes today, little canvas sneakers and jeans, and a sweater that looked soft and expensive in a way Caleb couldn't have named if he tried. Her hair was down. She looked in daylight about 10 years younger and 10 years older than she had on the path last night. Younger because the light was kinder. Older because she'd clearly been crying recently and hadn't bothered to hide it. Go ahead, she said. He sat back on his heels and wiped his hands on his jeans. It's worse than Dale thought. How much worse? The framing's gone in 2 places. The ledger board's pulling off the house. The post over there, he pointed, is going to fail inside a year if somebody leans on it wrong. The right thing to do is tear the whole west side down to the pilings and rebuild. The cheap thing to do is patch it and hope. How long for the right thing? 2.5, 3 weeks. If I get the materials quick. And the cost. He told her. He kept his voice flat and his face flat, and he did not apologize for the number because his father had taught him never to apologize for a fair number. She absorbed it. She did not flinch. "Do the right thing," she said. "Yes, ma'am. Sorry. Yes." She almost smiled. It was a small thing, gone fast, but he saw it. "I'll call Dale about a deposit for materials." I know he already. I'll call him about more." She crossed her arms. "Is your son going to be out here while you work?" "He'll be in the guest house, or with Margie, or on the path, not on the deck. I promise you that." "I wasn't asking because I'm worried about me. I was asking because I'm worried about him." "Oh. There are a lot of nails, and a lake." "I know." "Okay." She turned to go. She had made it 3 steps before she stopped, her back to him, and Caleb knew, with the certainty of a man who had watched his wife stop 3 steps away from him on a sidewalk 4 days before she died, that something else was coming. "Mr. Morgan." "Caleb." "Caleb." She didn't turn around. Did Dale tell you anything about me?" "He said you were having a rough patch. That's all." "That's all? You haven't seen anything about me recently?" "I don't really do the internet, ma'am." "Isla. Sorry." She was quiet for a long moment. "Okay," she said, and her voice was different, lighter, or maybe just looser, like somebody had let a little of the rope out. "Okay, thank you." She walked back to the house. Caleb watched her go. He watched her until she closed the back door behind her, and then he looked down at the pry bar in his hand and thought, for no reason he could name, about his wife, about Hannah, in the hospital bed 3 days before she went, looking at him with her eyes sunk deep and saying, "Cale, promise me you won't go weird. Promise me you won't shut the door." He had promised. He had, more or less, broken the promise. He had shut a lot of doors. He had not been cruel, and he had not been cold exactly, but he had made his life small on purpose because small was manageable, and manageable was survivable, and survivable was all he had been aiming for. A woman he did not know had just walked into his afternoon carrying something he recognized. He didn't know what to do with that information, so he did what his father had taught him. He picked up the pry bar and went back to work. At 2 in the afternoon, Oliver came tearing up the path with Biscuit at his heels, and a look on his face that Caleb had learned through painful trial and error meant, "I have done something, but I don't think it's my fault." "Dad." "What?" "The lady." "What about the lady?" "She's crying." Caleb put the hammer down. "Where?" "On the porch, the big porch. The front one." "How do you know?" "Because I went there. Ollie, we talked about—" Biscuit went first. Caleb closed his eyes for 1 deliberate second, opened them. "Is she okay?" "She said she was okay, but her face was doing the thing." "What thing?" "The thing Mom's face used to do before." Caleb did not respond to this for a moment, because he could not. "Okay, bud." "I gave her Mr. Pete." "You did what?" "I gave her Mr. Pete. She was crying. Mr. Pete helps." Caleb looked at his son, 6 years old, scabby-kneed, holding a piece of bark for no apparent reason, looking up at him with the entirely serious face of a small person who had, for the first time in his short life, done the most important thing in the room without being told. Caleb felt something shift in his chest that he was going to have to deal with later. "You go back to the guest house," he said. "Stay with Margie. I'll go check on her." "Is Mr. Pete going to be okay?" "Mr. Pete is going to be fine." He wiped his hands on a rag and walked around the side of the house, and he came up on the front porch slowly, the way you come up on a deer at the edge of a field. Isla was sitting on the porch steps. She had her knees drawn up to her chest and her forehead resting on them, and one hand curled, very gently, around a small, deeply loved stuffed fox. Her shoulders were shaking, but she was not making any sound. Caleb recognized the kind of crying that was. It was the kind you learn to do in bathrooms at work. He stopped at the bottom of the steps. "Ma'am." She didn't lift her head. "My son is 6, he said, "and he has given you his best and only friend in the world, and I am going to need that friend back at bedtime, so I just want to make sure he is in safe hands." There was a long pause. Then very slowly, she lifted her head. Her eyes were swollen. Her nose was running. She looked at him over the top of her knees, and she looked at the fox in her hand, and then she looked back at him, and she made a sound that was half a laugh and half something else. Something wrecked. He just handed it to me. He said, this helps. Yeah, he would. I don't know what to. You don't have to know. She looked at the fox again. Your son is a better person than I am. He's 6. He doesn't have a record yet. That got a real laugh out of her. Small, wet, but real. Caleb sat down on the bottom step. Not on her step. He left a step between them, and he kept his body turned toward the yard, not toward her, because 32 years of life and 5 years of being a widower had taught him that some people could only bear to be seen from the side. You don't have to tell me anything, he said. I'm not going to ask you anything. I'm just going to sit here for about 4 minutes because my son is worried about you. And then I'm going to get back to work, and you can keep the fox as long as you need to keep the fox. Okay? Okay. They sat. A breeze came off the lake. Somewhere in the trees, a woodpecker got started and then thought better of it. Caleb could hear faintly Oliver's voice from the direction of the guest house, asking Margie something about dinosaurs. My fiancé cheated on me, Isla said. Caleb didn't move. I'm sorry. Twice. That anyone knows about. I'm sorry. The internet knows. I don't. I know. That's why I'm telling you. He nodded. He didn't look at her. He could feel her trying to decide whether to say more, and he knew, from the same place inside himself that had known about the pry bar and the deer and the shut doors, that the kindest thing he could do was not turn his head. I built a company, she said. I built it from nothing. I built it when I was 23 years old in a studio apartment with a futon and a Craigslist desk, and 6 years later it's worth $340 million. And the headline today, the one that's still #1 on the blog, is Bennett betrayed. Wonder Girl's fiancé caught in second affair. Not the company, the fiancé. The man is the headline. Always the man is the headline. That's not fair. It's not. It's also, he said, careful, not the main thing. She turned her head. He felt her turn. What's the main thing? That he did it twice. She was quiet. Yeah, she said finally. Yeah, that's the main thing. Caleb put his elbows on his knees and looked out at the yard. He did not look at her. He was aware of her, acutely, in a way he had not been acutely aware of any woman in 5 years. And the awareness was not what he was afraid it would be. It was quieter than that. It was the way you're aware of a window when the wind changes. I lost my wife 5 years ago, he said. Car accident, drunk driver. My son was 13 months old. He paused. I'm not telling you that to compare. I'm telling you that because the thing I wish somebody had told me in the first week was that you're going to feel stupid for a while. Not about him, about yourself. For not seeing it, for whatever. And it's not fair and it's not true and it'll pass, mostly, but it'll be there for a minute. And I just want you to know that part is normal. She didn't say anything for a long time. How long is a minute? For me, it was about 2 years. Oh. Everybody's different. Oh. She looked down at the fox in her hand. She turned it over, very gently. One of its ears had been chewed on a long time ago and sewn back on by somebody who had been trying their best, and Caleb knew exactly who that somebody was, because it had been him, at 2 in the morning, 6 weeks after Hannah's funeral, with a sewing kit he had bought at a CVS, and absolutely no idea what he was doing. Okay, Isla said. Okay. I'll give him back the fox at dinner. He'd like that. Caleb, yeah. Thank you for not... Don't mention it. Thank you for not asking me any questions. You're welcome. He got up. He brushed the pine dust off his jeans. He was halfway down the walk when her voice came from behind him, quieter than before. Caleb? Yeah. What's his name? Your son. Oliver? Oliver? He answers to Ollie. Or the fox guy lately. She made the half-laugh sound again. He kept walking because he had learned a long time ago that there were moments where the only honest thing to do was keep walking, and because somewhere in his chest something was doing a thing he was not ready to name, and because the sun was starting to tilt and he had about 4 more hours of light and a ledger board that wasn't going to pull itself off the wall. Behind him, on the porch, Isla Bennett held a 6-year-old stuffed fox in both hands, and for the first time in 4 days, breathed all the way out. Up in the pines, the loon started up again. Down in the yard, Biscuit flopped onto his side in a patch of sun. And in the guest house kitchen, Margie stood at the window with a dishcloth over her shoulder, watching a carpenter walk back across a lawn toward a broken deck. And she didn't say a word about what she saw on his face, because she was a woman who had been keeping other people's secrets her whole working life, and she knew a beginning when she saw one, even when it didn't look like a beginning at all. The wind moved through the pines. The water kept doing what water does. And the first day at Harlow Lake ended, as most first days of most real stories do, with nobody involved having the faintest idea what they had just walked into. The fox came back to the guest house at 6:15 that evening, carried in the small, careful hands of a woman who had clearly practiced the walk down the path before taking it. Caleb saw her from his porch before she saw him. She had changed her clothes, a different sweater, jeans that looked less slept in, hairbrushed now and tied back with something elastic. And she was walking the way people walk when they are not entirely sure they will be welcome at the other end. Her eyes were still puffy. She had not tried to hide it, which he respected, because makeup on a face that had been through what hers had been through that afternoon would have looked like a lie, and she seemed suddenly to be a person who had run out of room for lies. Oliver was at the kitchen table with a coloring book and a crust of bread. Caleb stuck his head in the door. "Ollie, company." "Who?" "The lady." Oliver was off the chair before Caleb could finish the word, and by the time Isla stepped up to the porch, he was already at the screen door with his nose pressed into the mesh. "You have Mr. Pete." "I have Mr. Pete. I took very good care of him." "Did he help?" Isla crouched down so her face was level with Oliver's. Caleb watched her do it, and something in him went still, because he had not seen a woman crouch down to talk to his son at eye level in a very long time, and it turned out he had forgotten what it did to a room. "He helped a lot," she said. "I owe you. I mean it. He got me through a hard afternoon, and I'm going to remember that." Oliver considered her. His face did the thing where he was running the data in his 6-year-old head, deciding whether this was a real grown-up or a pretending grown-up. Caleb had watched him do it to teachers, to cashiers, to his own grandmother once, with devastating accuracy. "You can borrow him again," Oliver said, finally. "If you need." "That's very generous. But only at night, during the day I need him." "That's fair, and you have to feed him." "He eats?" "Pretend food. He's not picky." "I can do pretend food." She held the fox out through the screen. Oliver took it with both hands, held it up to his face, inspected it briefly for any sign that it had been emotionally altered by the experience, and then tucked it under his arm and went back to his coloring book without another word. Caleb stepped the rest of the way out onto the porch. He pulled the screen door shut behind him softly. "You didn't have to walk it down." I wanted to. She straightened up and put her hands in the pockets of her jeans. "I wanted to not be someone who keeps a child's stuffed animal hostage." He would have survived one night. I wouldn't have. He almost smiled. He turned his face a little so she wouldn't see it, because he wasn't sure yet whether smiling at her was allowed, or whether it was the kind of thing a man in his position was supposed to be careful about. 32 years old and a widower for 5 of them, and he still didn't know the rules for any of this. He was starting to suspect there weren't any. "You want to sit?" he said. "I shouldn't." "Okay." She sat. She sat on the same step he'd been sitting on the night before, and he sat on the one below her, and neither of them said anything for a minute. The lake through the trees was going pink at the edges. Somewhere down the shoreline, a boat motor coughed once and died. Caleb had a feeling about this evening that he'd been having less and less often in recent years, and that he'd forgotten how to name, a feeling that the day was not yet done with him. "I said something to you earlier," Isla said. "I said a lot of things." "You did?" "I shouldn't have." "Okay." "I don't know you." "Okay." That's not how I usually—" "Isla." She stopped. "I have put up drywall," he said, "next to men I have known for 20 years, and not said half of what you said to me on a porch. You didn't even invite me onto. Some people are like that. You put them on a job site, and they'll tell you about their divorce before lunch. Other people you could marry, and they wouldn't tell you their middle name." He looked out at the lake. People are just whatever shape they are when you catch them. You got caught in a shape. That's not a character flaw. She didn't answer for a while. That's a generous way to put it. It's just the way it is. Is that what you do on job sites? Let men tell you about their divorces. Apparently it's what I do. I'm not going to do it again. Okay. I mean it. I came down here to thank your son and to apologize to you for being, for being like that. And then I'm going to go back up to the house and I'm going to stay out of your way and you're going to fix my deck and that's what this is. Okay. Okay. She didn't get up. Caleb, to his own mild surprise, didn't particularly want her to. Margie made a pot roast, he said, after a while. She left half of it in my fridge because she thinks a man with a child is always one meal away from disaster, and she's usually right. There's more than we can eat. You're welcome to it. I'm not going to eat your pot roast. All right. I'm serious. Okay. I'm going to go. Okay. She didn't move. Behind them, from inside the cabin, Oliver's voice rose up in the particular tone he used when he was narrating the activities of an inanimate object. And then Mr. Pete said something muffled. And then the dinosaur said something more muffled. And then they were best friends. Isla's mouth did something at the corners that wasn't quite a smile. He does that a lot, Caleb said. It's the best thing I've heard in 4 days. Stick around. He'll do it through dinner. Caleb, I'm not asking you anything. I'm saying there's a pot roast, that's all. You don't want it, Biscuit gets it tomorrow. She looked at him for what felt to him like a long time, and what was really probably about 3 seconds. Her face was very still, and he couldn't read it, and he had the sudden and uncomfortable awareness that he had just asked something of a woman, however small, for the first time in 5 years, and that he had no idea what he would do if she said yes. I'll stay for 20 minutes, she said. All right. Not because I know. Because I haven't eaten since yesterday, and if I go back up to that house and stare at my phone, I'm going to do something I'll regret. That's as good a reason as any. She stood up. She brushed the pine needles off the back of her jeans. He stood up too, and for a second they were close enough on the porch that he could see she was taller than he'd thought, almost his height, and close enough that he could smell that she had not in fact showered. She smelled like a woman who had been crying in sun, which was a particular smell he had not encountered in a long time and had not realized he remembered. He opened the screen door and held it for her. Ollie, we got a guest for dinner. Oliver looked up. He looked at Isla. He looked at the fox. He looked back at Isla. Is she going to eat Mr. Pete's pretend food? She's going to eat real food, bud. Oh, good. Set. The pot roast was not fancy. Caleb warmed it in a cast-iron pan with the lid on and sliced a loaf of Margie's bread and opened a jar of pickles because the kitchenette didn't run to salad. And Isla stood in the doorway with her arms crossed in a way that he recognized as a woman making herself smaller in a room she was not sure of. He handed her a plate without looking at her directly. You're in charge of napkins, drawer by the fridge. Napkins. Paper towels, really. We don't do napkins. Paper towels are fine. Ollie, hands. I washed them. With soap? Mostly. Go again. Oliver went again. Isla got paper towels out of the drawer and put one at each of 3 places at the small round table. And when she set the last one down at the empty spot across from Oliver, Caleb saw her hand hesitate for a half second. The micro flinch of a woman realizing she had just naturally set a 3rd place at a table with a man and a child in it, and that this fact was, at minimum, worth noticing. He pretended not to see it. He brought the cast-iron pan to the table and set it on a dish towel. Family style, he said. You take what you want, you eat what you take. Rules of the house, Isla said. Rules of my house. Rules of your house, Oliver corrected, climbing up into his seat, are that if you take the last biscuit, you have to say thank you to the oven. Ollie, it's true. It's not true. It's a bit. It's a bit that's true, Oliver said firmly, and reached for a slice of bread. Isla laughed. It startled her. Caleb saw it startle her, saw her hand come up to her mouth like she hadn't meant for the sound to get out. And then she laughed again, a second time, softer, and she looked at Oliver like he was a small miracle she had not signed up for. Thank you to the oven, she said to Oliver gravely. Duly noted. You're welcome, Oliver told the oven. Caleb sat down and served the pot roast. He tried, and mostly succeeded, not to think about how long it had been since a woman other than Margie or his mother had sat down at one of his tables and eaten his food, and about how he did not in any way know this woman, and about how she was going to be gone in a few days, and about how none of that was the point. The pot roast was fine. The bread was better than fine. Oliver ate a piece of meat the size of a quarter and declared himself full, then asked for 3 more pieces of bread. Isla ate slowly, with the deliberate, too even pace of a woman who had not eaten in a long time and was afraid of what her stomach would do if she went too fast. Caleb noticed. Caleb didn't say anything about it. Caleb got up and refilled her water without asking, and she looked at the water and then at him, and something in her face did a small shift he couldn't read. "Your deck?" she said. "Yeah." "You really think 3 weeks?" "Closer to 3 than 2.5, now I've looked at it in light. That's longer than I was going to be here." "You got somewhere to be." She hesitated. Not really. Not yet." "Then it's as long as it takes. I'm paying you by the day." "You're paying me by the job, same as Dale wrote up. Nothing changes because I'm slow." "You're not slow." "I'm fair." Oliver, who had been listening without appearing to listen, piped up through a mouthful of bread. "Dad's not slow. Dad's careful. Careful is different." Isla looked at him. "Who told you that?" "Dad." "Dad told you Dad is careful." "Dad told me careful is different from slow. Dad did not tell me he was careful. I figured that out because of the measuring." "The measuring." "He measures everything twice," Oliver said, with the particular weary emphasis of a child who had clearly been forced to stand still and hold the end of a tape measure more than once in his short life. "Everything, even pancakes. You don't measure pancakes. He measures some pancakes." Caleb cleared his throat. "I measure one kind of pancake. One. It's a recipe. With a ruler. It's not a ruler. It's a..." "He measures pancakes with a ruler," Oliver told Isla, satisfied. "That's why Dad is careful." Isla was laughing again. Harder this time. Caleb looked at her across his own kitchen table in a guest house that wasn't his, in a life that wasn't his, and he thought, very clearly and without drama, "I am in trouble." He shook the thought off. He was being ridiculous. He was a 32-year-old carpenter with a pot roast and a 6-year-old and an aching lower back, and she was a woman whose life had detonated in public 4 days ago, and whatever this evening was, it was not the start of anything. He had been lonely for 5 years. He was allowed to enjoy a meal. He was allowed. "More bread?" he said to Isla, and his voice came out normal, which was a small miracle he gave himself credit for. "No, thank you. I'm actually full." "You ate about 1/5 of what's on that plate." "I know." "Take the rest, for later." "I can't." "Take it." She took it. Oliver fell asleep on the couch at 8:15 with biscuit draped across his feet and Mr. Pete tucked under his chin, and Caleb carried him to bed the way he always carried him, with a shoulder under the head and one arm around the legs, and a constant low-grade awareness that the boy was bigger every week and someday soon would not fit this way. He laid him down. He pulled the blanket up. He stood there for the minute that was not negotiable with him, watching the small chest rise. And when he came out of the bedroom, Isla was standing at the sink washing the dishes. "Hey, you don't have to..." "I know." "Isla." "Let me do the dishes, Caleb." He let her do the dishes. He took a dish towel off the handle of the oven and dried, because standing there watching her wash would have felt like something he wasn't ready to stand there doing, and he could tell she felt the same way about being watched. They worked in silence for a few minutes. Her sleeves were pushed up to the elbow. Her hands in the soapy water were pale and smaller than he'd expected, and the nails were bitten down. And Caleb thought about what Margie had said. She's been reasonable her whole life. That's partly the problem, and about how you didn't get to be CEO of anything at 29 by being the kind of person who bit her nails, and about how here she was anyway. "Your wife," Isla said. "Yeah." "What was her name?" "Hannah." "Hannah." "Yeah." "That's a good name." "It is." She handed him a plate. He dried it. She handed him another. "How did you..." she said, and then stopped. "Never mind, I shouldn't..." "You can ask." "I shouldn't ask." "You can." She rinsed a glass very carefully. She did not look at him. How did you keep going that first year? He thought about it. He thought about it carefully because she was a person who had asked him a careful question and she deserved a careful answer, and because it was a question he had not in fact been asked before. Not like that. People asked him how he was doing. People asked him if he was okay. Nobody had ever asked him how he had kept going because the answer to that, Caleb had found out, was something most people didn't actually want to know. I didn't, he said. She looked up. I didn't, he said again. Not the first year. That first year I was a body in a house with a baby. I did what the baby needed. I fed him. I changed him. I got up at night. I went to work when I had to go to work. I answered the phone when my mother called. That was it. I wasn't a person. I was a set of tasks. He folded the dish towel. My mother came and stayed for 6 weeks. Then my sister came and stayed for 4. Then Dale's wife, who is a woman I barely know, came over once a week for about a year and sat in my kitchen and made me eat lunch. That's how I kept going. Other people kept me going. I didn't keep myself going. I don't think anybody does, actually. I think that's a lie we tell. That's a lie we tell. Yeah. That you keep yourself going. Yeah. She was quiet. She rinsed the last glass. She set it in the drying rack and she put her hands on the edge of the sink and she stood there for a second with her head down. I don't have those people. No? Not really. Not like that. I have a mother who calls me every 6 weeks to ask me if I've been promoted. I have a sister who's married to a man who resents me. I have a staff of 140 people who all report to me. I have a PR firm on retainer. I had a fiancé. You had friends. I have friends. Yes. From school, mostly. 4 of them. 3 of them are out of the country, and 1 of them just had a baby, and I've been so... She stopped. She took a breath. I haven't called any of them about this. Not yet. Why not? Because I don't know how to sound when I tell them. Caleb put the dish towel down on the counter. You sound however you sound. It doesn't work like that for me. Why not? She laughed, but it wasn't the laugh from earlier. It was the other laugh. The one that came out of the wrong part of a person. Because I have spent my entire adult life, she said, being the version of myself that other people hired. I went to business school because my father told me to. I picked my company's category because a professor told me it was where the money was. I hired my COO because a board member recommended him. I said yes to the man who proposed to me on a rooftop in Brooklyn because every single person I knew told me he was a catch, and I was too old to be picky. And I was 27 years old, Caleb, 27. And I said yes because I could feel the room waiting for me to say it. I have not, in a very long time, said any sentence that I wasn't at some level performing. I do not know what I sound like when I'm just talking. Yeah? You sound fine. I don't. You do. You're doing it right now. She looked at him. Her eyes were bright in the kitchen light. Not crying, not yet, but close. The held at the edge kind. The kind that went away if you didn't comment on them. He didn't comment on them. Tomorrow, he said, I'm pulling the ledger board off the west side of the house. It's going to be loud, and it's going to be ugly, and there's going to be a lot of rusted lag bolts coming out of old wood. If you want something to do with your hands for a few hours, I could use somebody to hand me things. I don't know anything about carpentry. You don't need to. I need somebody who can hand me a pry bar when I say pry bar, and a hammer when I say hammer, and a cold water when I say Jesus. She looked at him for a long moment. Okay, she said. Okay. What time? 7. 7 in the morning. 7 in the morning. I don't know if I can be awake at 7 in the morning right now. 7:30. I'll wait. 8. 7:45. Final offer. Fine. Fine. She almost smiled. She put the dish towel back on the oven handle. She walked to the door of the cabin. She stopped with her hand on the screen. Caleb? Yeah. Thank you for dinner. Welcome. Thank you for not... Don't mention it. I wasn't going to thank you for not asking me anything. I was going to thank you for... She stopped. She looked for a second like she didn't know what she'd been going to thank him for, and then her face cleared a little and she said very quietly, "For feeding me. Any time. Good night, Caleb." "Good night, Isla." She went. He stood in the kitchen for a long time after the screen door banged shut behind her. Then he went out on the porch, and he sat on the step, and he put his head in his hands, and he stayed that way for about 4 minutes, not thinking, not really, just letting his heart do whatever thing it was doing and waiting for it to stop. It didn't stop. It slowed. That was going to have to be enough. Nick. She did not sleep well that night either, but she slept. 3 hours, maybe 4, which was more than she had slept in the 4 days previous. And when she woke up at 6:45 with a gray film over her tongue and the old familiar weight behind her eyes, she did something she had not done and she could not remember how long. She put her phone in a drawer. She put it in the drawer of the bedside table, and she shut the drawer and she stood there looking at the drawer for a minute, the way a woman might stand looking at a cage she had just locked a small dangerous animal inside. And then she went and washed her face and brushed her teeth and put on jeans and a flannel shirt she had bought on a whim 4 years ago and never worn. At 7:45, she walked out to the deck and Caleb Morgan was already there, on his knees, with a pencil behind his ear and a clipboard in his hand and a coffee cup sweating on the railing beside him. "Coffee's in the thermos," he said, without looking up. "You brought me coffee." "I brought a thermos. It's yours if you want it." She poured herself a cup. It was very strong and very hot, and she took one sip and made a face and then took another sip. And Caleb, without looking at her, said, "There's creamer in the truck if you need it. I don't take it, but I keep it for Dale." "I'm fine." "You made a face." "It's fine." "Okay." He stood up. He put the clipboard down on the railing. He wiped his hands on his jeans and he looked at her. Actually at her, for the first time that morning. And she saw him register the flannel and not say anything about the flannel. And she was grateful to him for not saying anything about the flannel, in a way that was all out of proportion to the actual act of not commenting on a piece of clothing. "Okay," he said. "First thing I need you to know, this is going to look like I'm breaking your house." "What do you mean breaking my house?" "I'm going to pry a 16-foot board off the side of the wall. There's going to be nails. There's going to be screws. Some of them are going to come out with pieces of the wall attached. It's going to sound like the building is failing. It's not failing. It's supposed to come off. I just want you to know that before it starts, because if I don't tell you, around noon, you're going to think I'm destroying the property." Noted. Second thing, if I tell you to move, you move. You don't ask why. You just move. You can yell at me about it later. Noted. Third thing, gloves. He handed her a pair of work gloves. They were enormous. They swallowed her hands up to the middle of her forearm. "These are your gloves." "These are mine. They're all I have. Your hands are small." "My hands are not small." "Isla, your hands are small." "Fine. Wear 'em anyway. I'll pick you up a smaller pair from the hardware store when I go for supplies." "You don't have to do that." "I'm going anyway." "Caleb?" "Yeah." "I can pay for gloves." "I know you can pay for gloves. I'm buying you gloves. They're $5. Let it go." She let it go. He handed her the pry bar. It was heavier than it looked. She took it in both hands and he said, "Just hand it to me when I ask." And he got down on his knees and got to work. The first hour was mostly watching. She handed him things. She handed him the pry bar and the hammer and the smaller pry bar and the hammer again and a flat chisel and the pry bar once more. He worked in a rhythm she had not encountered before in any professional setting in her life. Steady, unhurried, completely without performance. He did not sigh theatrically when something was difficult. He did not celebrate when something came loose. He did what the work asked him to do, and then he did the next thing. At 9:15, he sat back on his heels and wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist and said, "Water." She handed him the water bottle. He drank half of it in one pull. "You want a break?" he said. "No." "You sure?" "I'm sure." "Okay." He got back to work. She watched his shoulders under the thin gray shirt he was wearing, and she thought about nothing at all, for what felt like the first time in 4 years. At 10:30, Oliver came barreling up the path with biscuit and a handful of very small rocks that he announced were a collection, and he stood 3 feet back from the edge of the deck, not on it, Caleb had been clear. and he watched his father and Isla work for about 6 minutes in total silence, which was an Oliver record, and then he said, "Dad." "Yeah, bud." "The lady is wearing your gloves." "She is." "Why is the lady wearing your gloves?" "Because they're the only gloves I had. Her hands are small." "Her hands are small," Oliver repeated in exactly the voice of a 6-year-old filing this information away for later use in contexts unknown. Isla was laughing behind her coffee cup, quietly. She didn't want Oliver to see, and she didn't want Caleb to see, but Caleb saw. "Ollie, go tell Margie I said you could have a cookie." "Really?" "One cookie. Go." Oliver went at the speed that only the promise of an unsupervised cookie can produce in a 6-year-old. Biscuit went with him. The sound of them crashing through the pine needles faded toward the big house. Caleb did not look at Isla. He was pulling on a lag bolt that had not moved in 15 years. "You bribed your son with a cookie," Isla said. "I bribed my son with a cookie." "Why?" "Because you were laughing and I didn't want him to embarrass you out of it." She didn't answer for a second. "You noticed I was laughing." "I noticed. I was trying not to." "I know." "Why were you trying not to?" "I don't know. Same reason I try not to." He pulled on the bolt. It screamed and came free. He sat back. He set the bolt down on the wood beside him with more care than the bolt deserved. "You try not to laugh," Isla said. "Sometimes." "Why?" He looked at the bolt. He did not look at her. Habit, mostly. The first year, the year I was telling you about, when you're that kind of sad in that kind of house, the sound of a laugh in it's loud. It's the loudest thing. It wakes the baby up. It wakes you up. You stop doing it because you don't want to be that startling to yourself. And then you kind of forget. You forget you were someone who did it easy. You meet it again in other places, other people's houses, and it feels like a thing you're borrowing. "Boshi," she was quiet. "Caleb?" "Yeah." "Do you laugh now?" "Yeah, I laugh." "Easy?" He thought about it. He thought about Oliver on the drive out here, about the dragon under the hood, about the 6 years of small and huge and ordinary stupid jokes that had rebuilt him in the dark without his permission. "Easier than I used to." "Okay." "You? What about me? Do you laugh easy?" She took a long time to answer. "I used to," she said. When I was 20, I had a roommate at Stanford named Priya who could make me laugh until I couldn't breathe. I haven't seen her in 3 years. I don't think I've laughed like that in 3 years. I had forgotten that my body did that." She paused. "Your son made me laugh last night. 3 times. I counted. That's how surprising it was. I counted. He's a weapon. He really is. He gets it from his mother." He said it without thinking. It came out of his mouth and sat in the air between them, and he braced, automatically, for the flinch. His flinch, not hers. The small internal one that he always got when he used the word mother about Hannah in front of a woman who was not Hannah. It came. It passed. Faster than usual. He didn't know what to do with that. "I'm sure he does," Isla said quietly. "I bet she was wonderful." "She was." "Tell me one thing about her." One thing, if you want." He sat back on his heels. He put the pry bar down. He looked, for a long minute, out at the lake, and then he said, "She used to dance in the kitchen, badly, to anything, commercials. She'd hear 8 seconds of a jingle for car insurance, and she'd do this whole thing, arms, everything. She was a terrible dancer. She knew she was a terrible dancer. She did it on purpose to make me laugh, which it did, every time, even when I didn't want it to, especially when I didn't want it to. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Thank you for telling me. You asked. I'm glad I asked." He looked at her then, finally, and he saw her, really saw her, in a way he had not let himself see her the night before on the porch, or at the table, or over the dishes. Not the broken woman, not the woman on the internet, not the CEO, not the runaway. Just her. Standing on a half-torn-up deck in his gloves with coffee on her breath, and her hair starting to come out of its tie. A tired woman who had just asked him a real question and taken a real answer and not done anything stupid with it. "Pry bar," he said, and his voice was a little rougher than he wanted. She handed him the pry bar. They worked like that through the morning and through the early afternoon, and at some point around 2 o'clock, Margie came out with sandwiches on a plate and 2 cold beers and a look on her face that said she had opinions she was not going to voice. And the three of them ate on the good half of the deck with their legs hanging off over the lake. And Isla Bennett, who had eaten in the private dining rooms of hotels in 6 countries, would later say that the turkey sandwich Margie brought out that afternoon was the best thing she had ever put in her mouth. She would say this to Caleb 3 weeks later, in a context neither of them could currently foresee. Right now, on this afternoon, they ate in silence, and Oliver came back up the path with Biscuit and climbed into Caleb's lap and ate half of Caleb's sandwich. And Isla watched the three of them, man, boy, dog, with a look on her face that Margie, from the kitchen window, saw clear as day and did not mention to anyone, not even her husband, because some things you don't say out loud until the people involved have said them first. At 3:15, Isla's phone rang. She had been, for 6 hours, without it. She had for 6 hours been a woman with gloves on and splinters in her palms and a sandwich in her stomach, and a small boy who had, at one point, offered her the first rock from his collection, which was a gray one, and which she had accepted with the full solemnity the transaction required. Margie came out of the house with the phone in her hand and her face apologetic. "I wouldn't have brought it," Margie said, "but it's been ringing for about 20 minutes. It's your sister." Isla took the phone. She looked at the screen. Her face changed, not all at once, but in layers. The lake falling off at first, then Oliver, then the sandwich, then Caleb, and by the time she put the phone to her ear, she was someone else entirely. And Caleb, watching her face go, felt a very specific and unwelcome cold settle in his chest. "Kate," Isla said. Whatever Kate said, Isla listened to it. "When?" More listening. How did they even get?" More listening. Her free hand was shaking. Caleb saw it shake. She didn't, not at first. She was staring at a knot in the wood of the deck, and she was breathing very carefully, the way a person breathes when they have been taught somewhere that breathing can be a skill. Kate, slow down. What did he say?" Oliver was looking up at Caleb. Oliver's face was the alert, serious face of a child who did not know what was happening but had correctly intuited that something was. Caleb tightened his arm around him. "He's lying," Isla said flatly. That's not what happened. He can't..." Pause. "He can't do that." Pause. "I know he can. I know he can. I just..." She closed her eyes. Her jaw worked. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I need a minute. Let me call you back." She hung up. She did not put the phone down. She held it in her hand at her side and she stood very still, looking at the lake. And Caleb watched the muscle in her jaw work for about 15 seconds, and he was careful not to say anything, because there were moments when the kindest thing you could do for a person was not fill the air in the room, and he recognized that this was one of those moments. Oliver was less careful. "Are you okay?" Oliver said to Isla, in his direct, small voice. She looked down at him. She looked at him for a long time. The thing that moved across her face was not a thing Caleb could have put words to. Gratitude, maybe. Something past it. "No, sweetheart," she said. "I'm not okay right now, but thank you for asking." "Do you need Mr. Pete?" She made a sound that was half a laugh and all of a breath. "No, baby. You keep Mr. Pete. I'm going to handle this one on my own." "Okay. But thank you." "Okay." She turned to Caleb. Her eyes were dry and furious and terrified all at once. And Caleb had seen that combination on exactly one face in his whole life before. And that face had been his wife's, 12 hours before she had gotten in the car that a drunk man had driven into the side of. "I have to go make some calls," Isla said. "Okay." "I'm sorry, I was going to stay out here all day. It's fine." "It's not fine. Isla, it's fine." She looked at him. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For a morning." She walked back to the house. She did not look back. The screen door shut behind her with a crack that was louder than it needed to be, and then quieter than it should have been. And Caleb stood on a half-torn-up deck holding his son and watching her go, and he did not yet know what was in the phone call, and he did not yet know what David had done, and he did not yet know that a story written about Isla Bennett that morning in a publication with 41 million monthly readers contained 3 fabricated paragraphs and 1 real photograph, and a claim that was going to, by the following evening, cost her company a $68 million partnership, and cost her, personally, something she had not yet realized she still had to lose. He only knew, on that afternoon, 3 things. He knew he was standing on a deck he was going to finish rebuilding if it killed him. He knew the woman who had just walked off it was not going to get through whatever was coming by herself, and that he had, somehow, without being asked, without signing anything, without meaning to, become, in the last 26 hours, one of the very small number of people in her life who was going to be in the room when she didn't. And he knew that his son, who was 6 years old and missing a front tooth, and was at that moment winding a small hand into the front of Caleb's shirt and leaning his head against Caleb's chest, was watching a woman walk away from them up a path, and was, in his own unspoken 6-year-old way, deciding that he didn't want her to. The wind came up off the lake. It moved through the pines. The loon started somewhere and stopped. Caleb stood on the deck until the screen door of the big house opened and closed a second time, further inside, and then he set his son down and put a hand on the top of his son's head and went back to work. Because work was the shape of the only promise he knew how to keep, and because a ledger board, once you had started pulling it off a wall, had to come the rest of the way off before the weather turned. He worked until the light went. And up in the big house, behind a door she had closed 3 times to make sure, Isla Bennett sat on the floor in a flannel shirt that smelled like sawdust, and held her phone in both hands, and did not cry, because crying was not what this was. This was something else. This was the beginning of a fight, and she knew the difference, even now, even like this. She had been fighting her whole life. She had just, for the first time, lost the thing she had been fighting to protect, which was the idea of herself. What she had left to fight for was going to have to be something new. She did not know yet what it was, but she was starting, in a way she could not have named, to suspect that the answer was down the path in a cabin with a tin roof, eating mac and cheese with a boy who measured pancakes. She set the phone down on the floor beside her. She sat there a long time. She sat on the floor of the big house for a long time after the light went, and at some point around 8:30 in the evening she got up because she had been trained at some point in her life by somebody or something never to let a bad hour last more than an hour if she could help it. She picked up the phone. She called her sister back. "Kate. Izzy? Oh my... Izzy, are you..." "Tell me again, slower." He went on that podcast, the one with the finance guy, the one with the beard. Shaw. Yes, Shaw. He went on Shaw's podcast and Izzy, I don't want you to read any of it. I really don't. Kate, tell me what he said. He said you knew. Knew what? About the company. The data thing. The thing Finn told you about in January. He said you buried it. He said you knew about it for 6 months before the Series C closed and you... Izzy, he's saying you lied to investors. On the podcast. He said the words. He said she lied to the board. She lied to me. She was going to lie to the acquirers. Those words. In that order. I wrote it down because I knew you'd ask. Isla was standing at the window over the kitchen sink in the big house, in the dark, looking out through the trees at the square of yellow light that was the guest house porch, and she closed her eyes for a long second and opened them again. When did it air? 3 hours ago. Izzy, it's everywhere. TechCrunch already has it. I got an alert on my phone and that's how I even... Have you talked to Mom? Mom is Mom. She called me first to ask whether it was true. Perfect. She's scared. She's always scared. She's scared like other people have hobbies. Izzy? Sorry, I'm sorry. Sorry. There was a silence on the line. Isla could hear, in the background of her sister's house in Evanston, the sound of a dishwasher running and a child asking a question and Kate's husband answering the question in the low, patient voice that Kate's husband used with the kids, and never with Isla, which was one of the small private grievances Isla had been carrying around for 7 years and which, tonight, she discovered she no longer had the energy for. Kate. Yeah. Is it true? Is what true? What he said. On the podcast about the January thing. Is that what it looks like from the outside? Izzy, I don't understand what he's talking about. Finn flagged a data anomaly in January, a compliance thing. We sat on it for 6 weeks while we figured out if it was real. It wasn't. We ran the audit, we cleared it, we documented everything, we moved on. That's what he's describing. He's describing a compliance review that we passed. Okay. But he's describing it like I hid something. Yes? He is. Okay. Izzy, do you have the documentation? Of course I have the documentation. I have every email. I have the third-party auditor's report. I have board minutes. I have everything, Kate, because I'm the kind of person who keeps everything. And he knows that I'm the kind of person who keeps everything, which is why he is going on a podcast to say it and not filing a lawsuit to say it. Okay. He's lighting it on fire because he knows I can win a court, but I can't win a feed. Izzy. He knows me. Izzy, sit down. I am sitting down. You're lying. I'm standing at the sink. Is that sitting adjacent? No. Sit down. Go sit on a chair. Isla sat down on a chair. She sat at the kitchen table in the big house in the dark, and she put her elbow on the table and her forehead on the heel of her hand, and she stared at the grain of the wood, and she felt, for the first time in 4 days, not sad. Something else. Something that had been waiting underneath the sad and was now, finally, coming up to breathe. Kate, I'm here. I'm going to kill him. I know. I am going to take him apart. I know, Izzy. I need my laptop. I left it in Chicago. I need Priya to overnight it. No, I need somebody to drive it out here. No, I need... Izzy, slow down. I'm not slow. This is not a slow situation. He has taken the one thing I built, Kate. The one thing in my life that is actually mine. And he is dragging it behind his car down a highway at 70 miles an hour because I made him look bad at a dinner party. This is not slow. This is... Izzy, can I say one thing? What? You have been on the phone for 9 minutes and you have not cried once. Isla stopped. You cried, Kate said more gently, for 3 days straight, every time I called, every time Mom called. Every time you answered, you were crying before you said hello. You called me on Tuesday morning at 5 a.m., and you couldn't make a sentence. You were, Izzy, you were in pieces. And now it's Thursday, and your ex has just tried to end your career in public, and you are furious. You are not broken. You are angry. And I want to say something to you that I do not usually say to you because I am your big sister, and I have a complicated relationship with being proud of you. Kate, I'm proud of you. Don't. I'm proud of you. Something has changed in the last 48 hours, Izzy, and I don't know what it is, but I'm glad. Isla didn't answer. She was looking out the window again. Out the little window over the table this time, the one that faced the pines. She could see the square of yellow porch light, and she could see, faintly, a shape on the porch steps. A man with a boy on his lap, the boy leaning against the man's chest, the man's arm around the boy. The two of them not doing anything in particular, just sitting, in the kind of stillness that didn't look like stillness from the inside. It's been 48 hours, Isla said quietly. I know. That's not enough time for something to change. I don't know, Izzy. I think sometimes it is. I think sometimes it's exactly that. I think sometimes it's 48 hours, or it's 3 minutes, or it's one sentence a stranger says to you at a party, and you carry it around for the rest of your life and you never tell anybody where it came from. When did you get wise? I've been wise. You've been busy. Isla laughed. It was a short laugh, and it was mostly a nose laugh, and it was not an especially funny moment, but it was a laugh, and on the other end of the line in Evanston, her sister heard it and closed her eyes with relief. Kate, yeah, I have to make about 11 phone calls. I know. I'll call you in the morning. Promise me. I promise. Izzy, yeah. Where are you? Isla looked out the window again, at the porch, at the shape of the man and the boy. I'm at the lake house. Are you alone out there? Yes, Isla said, and then she said, no. And then she said after a pause, I'm the only one in the house. Okay. It's a long story. It usually is. Good night, Kate. Good night, Izzy. She hung up. She sat at the kitchen table with the phone face down on the wood, and she did not get up for about 5 minutes. Then she got up. She went to the sink. She splashed cold water on her face from the faucet and dried it on a dish towel that smelled like Margie's laundry soap, which was a smell Isla had, apparently without knowing, come to associate in the last 2 days with safety. She put on a jacket that was hanging by the back door. It was too big for her. It was a man's jacket, and it had belonged, some long time ago, to her father, and she had not worn it in 8 years. She didn't know why she put it on now. She put it on now because it was there, and because it was warm, and because something in her, small and stubborn and newly awake, wanted, for this one walk, to be wrapped in something. She walked down the path. Caleb saw her coming before Oliver did. He was on the porch step with his back against the post, and Oliver lying sideways in his lap, half asleep, with his head on Caleb's thigh, and one hand curled into the fabric of Caleb's shirt. And Caleb had been, he would not have been able to say what he had been doing for the last hour, exactly. Not thinking. Thinking, but not about anything. Waiting, maybe, although he would not have used that word either, because the word implied an ending, and he was not in any way sure of what ending he would have wanted. He saw her come out of the trees, and he felt his shoulders drop about a quarter inch, and he was grateful that Oliver was too sleepy to see it. She stopped at the bottom step. She put her hands in the pockets of a jacket that was not hers, and she looked at him and at Oliver and at the line of Oliver's eyelashes against Oliver's cheek, and she said quietly, so as not to wake him, "Is he asleep?" "Almost. I don't want to—" "He's sleeping in 20 minutes, no matter where I put him. You can talk." She sat on the bottom step. She did not sit on his step. She sat one below him, the way he had done with her the afternoon before, and the symmetry of it was not lost on either of them, although neither of them mentioned it. The lake through the trees was black, and the moon was a thumbnail. "I owe you some context," she said. "You don't owe me anything." "I do, actually. Not because you're asking, because I'm going to be on the phone a lot the next few days, and there's going to be things. I don't want you to think I'm the person on the internet. I don't want you to have to piece it together from whatever you overhear. I'd rather tell you." "All right," she told him. She told him in shorter sentences than she would have told anyone else. She told him about the company, what it did, which he mostly followed, and what it was worth, which she watered down because the number embarrassed her in his presence in a way it never had in a boardroom. She told him about Finn, who was her CTO, and about the data anomaly in January, which she tried to explain in plain English and mostly succeeded. She told him about the audit. She told him about the Series C. She told him, without a lot of detail, about David. Not the wedding, not the ring, not the rooftop, but David as a person. David as a man who had met her at a networking event 2 years ago and told her on the third date that he had been waiting all his life for a woman who didn't need him, and how she had taken that, at 27, for a compliment, and how she understood now, at 29, that it had been a warning. And she told him about the podcast. When she got to the podcast, her voice changed. It did not crack. It sharpened. Caleb, who had spent a fair amount of his life listening to the voices of men and women who had just had something taken from them, recognized the sharpening, and he did not like who she was about to become over the next 72 hours, because he knew how much it was going to cost her to become that person, and he knew she was going to do it anyway. And he did not know yet whether he was supposed to say anything about it. "He's lying," she said. "He knows he's lying. He knows the documentation exists. He's saying it on a platform he knows I can't fight fast enough to matter." "How long before you can fight back?" "Day and a half, maybe 2. My lawyers are in Chicago. My COO is in Seattle. Finn's at a conference in Berlin, and he can't leave until Saturday because he's giving a keynote that's already been rescheduled twice. I have to coordinate all of them. Then I have to get a public statement through 3 different firms before it goes out, because the one I want to put out would open me up to a different kind of lawsuit." "What's the one you want to put out?" She laughed, small and dry. 2 words, she said. "I can't say them in front of your son. Ollie's asleep." I can't say them in front of you either. Fair. She watched the lake. Caleb. Yeah. Can I say something and you don't have to say anything back? Yeah. I am very angry. I am more angry than I have been in a very long time, and I am about to spend the next 2 days on phone calls. And when I come out of those phone calls, I am going to be a different person than the one who is sitting on this step. I am not telling you this as a warning. I am telling you this because I don't want you to be startled. The woman in the flannel shirt today, the one who handed you the pry bar, she's real. She's me. But she is not the only person I am. The other person I am is coming online now, and she is less nice, and she is less quiet, and she is going to be in my house, but it's going to be loud, and she is not who you think I am, and I wanted to tell you, while I was still the other one, that the other one is real too. Caleb was quiet. Oliver in his lap murmured something that sounded like, "Tell him I brought the rocks," and did not wake up. Isla. Yeah. I don't think you're telling me what you think you're telling me. No? You think you're warning me you're about to be a shark, mean. I'm not going to be mean. Yeah, you are. A little. It's fine. I've been mean, and Ollie's been mean. Margie's been mean. I'd put money on it. The thing you're describing, where you spend 2 days on the phone fixing something somebody broke, that's not... You don't need to warn me about that, is what I'm saying. You're not going to scare me off by being angry about something you have a right to be angry about. I don't need the other version of you. I was fine with this one. I'll be fine with that one. She didn't answer right away. That, she said finally, was a very long sentence for you. I know. I'm winded. Caleb. Yeah. Thank you. Welcome. She looked at her hands in the jacket pockets for a moment, and then she pulled them out and she did something that neither of them were prepared for. She put her hand on top of his hand, which was resting on the step between them, and she left it there for about 4 seconds, and then she took it away. I'm going to go inside, she said. Okay. I probably won't be around the deck tomorrow. Okay? Tell Oliver I'll tell him. Tell him I said I'm sorry I can't help hand you things. He'll understand. Good night, Caleb. Good night, Isla. She stood up. She started up the path, and then she stopped. She didn't turn around. She just stopped, with her back to him. Caleb? Yeah. Do you lock the guest house at night? It was a strange question, and he took it the way it was meant. No. Okay. Why? I don't know. I wanted to know. I don't lock the guest house. Okay. She walked on. He watched her until she was past the line of the pines, and he could only see the edges of her jacket moving in the dark. And then he sat for a long time with his son sleeping on his leg and his own hand lying in the place her hand had been for 4 seconds. And he said, in a voice too quiet for anyone to hear, well, he carried Oliver to bed. He did not lock the guest house. He did not, that night, sleep especially well. The next 2 days at the Bennett estate were not, by any reasonable measure, a peaceful interlude in a love story. They were a war. Isla did not come out of the big house. Margie brought her trays 3 times a day, coffee and toast in the morning, a sandwich and soup at lunch, and whatever she had cooked for dinner, which Isla would eat half of, and leave outside the door of the reading room with a handwritten note that said, "Thank you. Sorry about the plate." Margie stopped commenting on the plates. Margie started leaving them in paper-to-go containers. That was the level of negotiation happening inside the house. Through the window of the reading room, from the path, you could sometimes see Isla at a desk that had not held a working adult in 3 decades, on a laptop that Kate's husband had driven 4 hours from Evanston on Friday morning to deliver, speaking into a headset in a voice that Caleb, passing by twice on his way to the deck, could hear as low and controlled and not her voice exactly, the voice, he thought, of the other person she had told him was coming. On Friday afternoon, a man in a gray suit and expensive shoes drove up the gravel drive in a car with Illinois plates and stepped out and introduced himself to Margie as Theodore Castellano of Castellano, Wright, and Pham. Margie brought him into the house. He was in there for 6 hours. When he left, he looked tired, which Caleb took as a good sign, because in Caleb's experience, tired lawyers meant real work was being done, and the other kind meant bad news was being discussed. On Friday night, around 11, Caleb was on the guest house porch with a beer and a book he wasn't really reading when he saw a woman in a too-big jacket come down the path in the dark. She was barefoot again. She stopped at the bottom of the steps. She did not come up. "You're up," she said. "Yeah. I walked. I didn't know I was going to come down here. I just walked." "That's all right. I can't. I can't sit with you. I don't have it in me right now. If I sit down, I'll break something." "Okay. I wanted to see that the light was on. It's on." "Okay. Isla." "Yeah. It's going to be on tomorrow too." She didn't answer. She stood there for a minute. Then she turned around and walked back up the path, and Caleb watched her go, and he thought about Hannah's mother, who had flown in from Portland for the funeral and had said something to him on the second day that he had not, at the time, understood. Hannah's mother had said, "The trick of losing something, Caleb, is that it's not all the way gone until you stop being the person who had it." He had thought she meant Hannah then. Now, watching another woman walk into the dark toward another kind of grief, he thought maybe Hannah's mother had meant something bigger than that. Maybe she had meant that the part of you that loses something loses with it a version of itself, and that if you are lucky, somewhere down the road, you meet a stranger who needs that version back, and you find out you've been keeping it for them without knowing. That was probably too many thoughts for a 32-year-old carpenter on a porch with a warm beer. He put the book down. He went to bed. On Saturday morning, Isla came out of the house at 7:15 in different clothes: black jeans, a black sweater, hair in a tight low knot, no jacket. And she walked down to the guest house porch and she stood at the bottom of the steps and she said, without a greeting, "I need your help." Caleb was drinking coffee with Oliver at the porch table. "Okay." Not with the deck." "Okay. I need somebody to drive me to a press conference in Madison." Caleb put his coffee cup down. "Today, at 2 o'clock. "Why me?" "Because my lawyer flew back to Chicago last night. Because Kate can't leave the kids. Because my mother is not helpful. Because the car that is supposed to come for me got rerouted to a different airport because of weather and won't be here until 4 because I cannot drive myself right now. Because what?" She looked at him. "Because I would rather walk into that building today with you in the car than with anyone else in my life." He didn't know what to do with that. He was 32 years old and a widower for 5, and he had spent those 5 years carefully, painstakingly, one brick at a time, constructing a life in which no woman ever said a sentence like that to him. And here was one saying it at 7:17 in the morning, with her hands in her pockets and her face the color of the sky before snow. "Dad!" He looked at Oliver. "Yeah, bud. Can I go?" "You can't go, Ollie. It's a grown-up thing." "Can Biscuit go?" "No, it's a grown-up thing." "Can Mr. Pete go?" Isla looked at Oliver. Something in her face softened that, 20 seconds earlier, Caleb would not have believed was capable of softening today. "Mr. Pete could go," she said, "if he wanted to, if that was okay." Oliver considered this. Then he got down off his chair and went inside, and he came back about 90 seconds later with the fox in both hands, and he handed it to Isla, and he said solemnly, "He goes in your pocket, and he helps. You don't have to. You don't have to feed him today. He's already ate." Isla took the fox. She did not look at Caleb. "Thank you, Oliver. Welcome. I'll bring him back tonight." "Okay." Caleb stood up. He put his mug down. He looked at his son, and his son looked back at him in the knowing, adult way that 6-year-olds occasionally had, the way that Caleb knew Oliver had gotten from Hannah, and he put his hand on top of his son's head for a second without saying anything. "Margie's got him," Isla said. "I already asked. I'm sorry. I should have—" "It's fine." "I'm sorry. I should have asked you first." "It's fine, Isla." "Okay. Give me 10 minutes." "Okay." The drive to Madison took 92 minutes. Caleb drove his pickup because her car, which he had glimpsed through the garage window once, and which was a matte black thing with a dashboard that looked like the cockpit of a jet, was not something he was willing to be responsible for in the rain that had started somewhere around the county line. She did not argue with the truck. She climbed into the passenger seat and buckled herself in and put Mr. Pete in the cup holder, very carefully, with the fox's little fabric nose pointed out toward the windshield, and Caleb saw her do it and did not comment because commenting would have broken something. For the first 20 minutes, she did not speak. She was making notes on her phone in a typing speed that Caleb had only ever seen teenagers achieve. Her thumbs were a blur. Her face was the face of a woman writing something down that she was going to say out loud to a room, and Caleb kept his eyes on the road and let her work, because the kindest thing he could do right now was be a vehicle. At 30 minutes in, she put the phone down on her thigh. Caleb? Yeah. Can I practice it on you? Practice what? What I'm going to say. The first 3 minutes. I have to read it twice, out loud to a person, or I'm not going to know if it sounds like a human. Okay? You can tell me if it sounds like I'm lying. I'm not going to be a great audience, Isla. I don't know the first thing about your business. That's why you're a great audience. If it sounds like I'm lying to you, who doesn't know anything, it definitely sounds like I'm lying to the reporters, who know everything. All right. She read it. She read it out loud in a measured voice over the sound of the windshield wipers, and Caleb drove with his hands at 10 and 2 and listened, and at one point about 90 seconds in, he said, "Stop." She stopped. Was it that word? The word you just used, comprehensive. Swap it out. Why? Because no real person says that word. Real people say full, or whole, or they say everything, which is what you mean. You're saying my statement sounds too corporate. I'm saying the sentence you just read sounded like a press release. The rest of it sounded like you. She looked at him. Okay? Keep going. She kept going. At 3 minutes, she stopped on her own. That's the first 3. The rest is responses to questions. That's good. What was good about it? The last line. The last line is, I built this company. It is mine. I am not going to spend the rest of my career watching a man I used to sleep with rewrite my record. That's the one. You think that's the one. Isla, if you say that line out loud in a room with the face I just heard you read it with, nobody is going to remember anything else you said. That's what I'm afraid of. Why? Because I spent 6 years learning how to never sound like a woman who mentions the men she used to sleep with. Yeah, well, he brought it up first. She laughed. Small, sharp, a single exhalation. He brought it up first, she said. He did. Caleb. Yeah. Why are you helping me? He had known, at some level, that this question was coming. He had not known, until it arrived, that he was not prepared to answer it. He drove for about 10 seconds before he spoke. I don't know, he said. Okay? I mean, I know why. I just don't know if the why is the kind of thing you put into words yet. I don't want to put it into words wrong, so I'd rather not. Okay? Is that okay? That's okay. They were quiet for a minute. It was okay when I said it to you on the step, too, he said. If that's any help. Which part? When you said the thing about walking into the building, you didn't put that all the way into words either, and I understood it anyway. She put her hand very briefly on top of his hand, which was on the gear shift. She took it away. She did not look at him. Keep driving, she said. Yeah. I need to read it one more time. Okay. She read it again. He told her this time that the middle part was still a quarter too long. She cut the middle part. By the time they hit the exit for downtown Madison, the statement was down from 4 minutes to 3 minutes and 20 seconds. And it was a thing Caleb, who had not read a press release in his life, could stand to listen to. And when she folded her phone and put it in her pocket, her hand was shaking in a way it had not been shaking at the start. You can stop shaking, he said. I'm not shaking. Okay. I'm not. Okay. Fine. I'm shaking. You can stop. You're going to be fine. How do you know? Because you wrote something 3 times in a truck in the rain and didn't cry once. And the last time I saw a person do something like that, that person became a widow on a Tuesday and was back at work on the following Monday because her son needed shoes, and that person was my sister, and she is still, as of today, the most unshakable human being I have ever met. Isla didn't say anything. She looked out the window. The buildings of downtown Madison were wet and gray and getting bigger. You think I'm like your sister? I think, Caleb said slowly, that you are the second woman I have ever ridden in a car with on the way to a fight, That's all I'm saying. Okay? Building's on the left. I see it. I'll park. Caleb? Yeah. Come with me into the lobby. I was going to. Just the lobby, not the room. Just the lobby. Okay, Bob. The lobby of the building was marble and glass and too cold, and Isla's lawyer was waiting at the elevator with a woman Caleb didn't recognize, who turned out to be her PR lead, a compact person in a gray suit named Priya, who hugged Isla hard and quick in a way that did not seem to be about hugging, and then stepped back and inspected her face and said, "You look like hell." "Thanks, Pri. I mean it kindly. You look like a woman who's been wronged. It'll play well. Don't put on makeup." "I wasn't going to." "Did you eat?" "Half a bagel." "You have to eat." "I can't eat. There's a granola bar in my bag. Eat it in the elevator." They were already moving. The lawyer was speaking quietly into Isla's ear about something Caleb could not follow. Priya was on her phone. Isla stopped in the middle of a moving swirl of people who worked for her, and she turned around. Caleb was 3 steps back, next to a potted fig tree, with his hands in the pockets of a flannel jacket that was the wrong thing to be wearing in a marble lobby. "Caleb, I'm here. I'll be in the lobby. I'll come down when it's over. Take your time." She looked at him for one more second. She took Mr. Pete out of her jacket pocket. She held him in both hands. Priya, watching this, opened her mouth to ask a question, saw the look on her boss's face, closed her mouth again. "Hold him," Isla said, and held the fox out to Caleb. He took it. "Okay," he said. "Okay." She turned around. She walked into the elevator. The doors closed on her, and on her lawyer, and on Priya, and on a small knot of people Caleb did not know who belonged to her. And Caleb stood in the lobby with a 6-year-old stuffed fox in his hand, and he did not sit down for 48 minutes, because he did not know if sitting down was what he was supposed to do. He read the press conference later that evening in a room full of people he would not meet for another 2 weeks, and he would not watch the video of it, because Caleb did not watch videos. But Margie would watch it, twice, and Margie would say to her husband, over a plate of pot roast, that the girl had gone up there and made a man twice her size in a dark suit look exactly like what he was, which was a liar, and that there had been one moment near the end when the girl had paused for about 3 seconds and looked at something just off camera and then said, "I am not going to spend the rest of my career watching a man I used to sleep with rewrite my record," and that the room had for one long second gone completely silent. "Like somebody turned a knob," Margie would say. "Like somebody turned a knob and all the noise went out of the world." In the lobby of the building in Madison, Caleb did not know any of this yet. He knew only that 48 minutes was a long time, and that the fig tree was plastic, and that his palms were sweating around a stuffed animal that had been sewn back together by a man in a CVS aisle in the middle of a night he would have rather forgotten. He stood. He waited. He did not check his phone. He did not, for that 48 minutes, think about anything in particular except that he hoped, very much, that the woman in the elevator was okay. At 51 minutes, the elevator opened. Isla stepped out alone. Her lawyer was behind her, talking to Priya. Priya was on her phone again. The knot of people was still a knot, but it had loosened. The whole atmosphere of the group had changed, the way the air changes after a storm passes a town. Isla walked across the lobby toward him. She was not running. She was walking evenly, one foot in front of the other, and her face was the face of a woman who had just done a thing she had been preparing for and who had not yet decided whether she had done it well. She stopped in front of him. "How was it?" he said. "I don't know." "You don't know?" "Ask me in a week." "Okay." She looked up at him. "Caleb." "Yeah." "Can we go home?" The word home sat in the air between them for a long half-second, and she heard it as she said it and did not try to take it back. And Caleb heard it too, and did not try to give it back. "Yeah," he said, "we can go home." He handed her Mr. Pete. She put the fox into her pocket. She walked out of the lobby ahead of him, and she did not look at Priya, and she did not look at the lawyer, and she did not look at the reporters who were still milling around the front steps of the building, waiting for someone to emerge, because Isla and Caleb went out a side door that Priya had, in a small, quiet act of protection, arranged for them 90 seconds earlier. They got back in the truck. Caleb turned the key. The truck rattled. Somewhere under the hood, the dragon roared, and Isla Bennett, for the first time in 5 days, closed her eyes against the passenger window on the way out of a city and slept. She slept from the highway exit all the way past the cattle guard, and Caleb did not turn the radio on and did not tap the steering wheel and barely adjusted the mirrors because he had put his own son to sleep 1,000 times in 1,000 moving vehicles, and he knew exactly how fragile the first 20 minutes of somebody else's rest was. The rain had stopped somewhere west of Baraboo. The trees along the road had the dark shine of wet bark, and the sky above them was going the color that skies went in late September in Wisconsin about an hour before real dusk, a kind of blue that did not have a name and that Caleb had been looking at his whole life without ever trying to name. Isla's head was against the passenger window and her mouth was slightly open, and she was breathing the way people breathe when they have finally put down a weight, and Caleb did not look at her more than twice, because looking at her felt like something he had not earned the right to do yet, and because looking at the road was, at this particular moment, the one useful skill he had. She did not wake up until he came off the gravel and onto the Cedar Plaque Drive. Oh, yeah. How long was I out? About an hour and a half. I was supposed to call Finn when we got back to cell service. Cell came back about 40 minutes ago. You didn't wake me up. No. She rubbed her eyes. She sat up straight in the seat. She had a red line on her cheek from the seam of the window glass. And Caleb did not point it out, because in every relationship that had ever mattered to him in his life, there came a moment where a woman had a red line on her cheek, and you either told her or you didn't. And Caleb had been a man, always, who didn't. I'm not mad you didn't wake me up, she said quietly. Okay. Caleb. Yeah, I haven't slept like that in, I don't even know. Months? I don't know. All right. I know what that is. I know why I could do it. Please don't make me say it out loud. I won't. He parked behind the big house, and Margie was already on the back step, drying her hands on a dish towel, with Oliver at her hip and Biscuit at her ankle. Oliver broke loose the second the truck came to a stop. Caleb got out in time to catch him. Dad. Hey, bud. Is she okay? Ask her yourself. Oliver looked past him at the passenger side door. Isla was just then stepping down out of the truck, and she took a second to get her balance because the truck was higher than she was used to and her legs had been folded under her for an hour and a half. Oliver walked over to her with the absolute directness of a 6-year-old, and he stopped in front of her and he put his hand, very small and very serious, on her wrist. Are you okay? He said. I'm okay, Oliver. Did Mr. Pete help? Mr. Pete was a champion. Did you give him back? He's in my pocket. Oh. She dug in the jacket pocket and pulled out the fox. She held him out. Oliver took him with both hands and inspected him for a long, grave moment, the way a head of state inspects a diplomat returned from a dangerous country, and then he nodded once and tucked the fox under his arm. Okay, Oliver said. Okay. You can borrow him again, anytime. I might. Not tonight, though. Tonight he comes home. Tonight he comes home. Margie was watching all of this from the step, with the expression of a woman who had not worked up the energy to pretend she wasn't watching. She came down off the step at her own pace, and she took Isla by both elbows. Not hard, but firmly. And she looked at her face, up close, the way a grandmother looks at a fever. You ate half a bagel today. Priya told you that. Priya texted me 20 minutes ago. She wanted me to know. She's a good one, that girl. Come into the kitchen. Margie. Come into the kitchen. Isla came into the kitchen. Caleb did not come into the kitchen. He stood in the yard with his son on his hip and Biscuit leaning against his shin, and through the big window he watched Margie put a bowl of something hot in front of Isla at the table and stand over her until she picked up a spoon. Isla picked up the spoon. Isla ate. Margie sat down across from her and did not say anything, the way country women had been not saying anything across kitchen tables since the founding of kitchens. And Caleb watched them both for a minute and then turned and carried his son down the path to the guest house. Because the scene in that window was not a scene he was in yet, and he was too tired to pretend he was going to be. He was not expecting her that night. She came down anyway. It was past 10. Oliver had been asleep for an hour. Caleb was on the couch with a book he actually was reading this time, a worn paperback about a man who ran a hardware store in Maine, and when the knock came on the screen door, it was so soft he almost missed it. She was standing on the porch with a dish towel full of something in her hand. "Margie sent cookies," she said. "Margie didn't send cookies." "No, she didn't. I took them off a cooling rack without asking and walked down here with them. You can tell her I stole them." "I can't tell her. She'll withhold cookies for the rest of the week." "I'll claim responsibility in the morning. Come in." She came in. She sat on the couch at the far end with two whole cushions between them, and she put the dish towel on the coffee table and unfolded it. There were 6 cookies. They smelled like brown butter and something else, something deeper. She took one. He took one. She didn't say anything for a while. The cabin was dim, lit by the one lamp by the couch and the yellow glow from the kitchen, and outside the screen the pines were doing their low, slow breathing. And somewhere across the lake the loon was back and was, as loons always were, unsatisfied. "How'd it go after you called Finn?" "Good. He was good. He'd already drafted the technical rebuttal in his hotel room in Berlin. He just needed me to sign off." She bit the cookie. "The Bloomberg reporter retracted 20 minutes ago. They corrected 3 of their original paragraphs and pulled the piece down while they rewrite it. That's rare. That doesn't usually happen." "You did it." "My lawyer did it." "You did it." "My lawyer and I did it." "You did it, Isla." She looked at the cookie in her hand. "I did it. Yeah. I did it. And I don't know what to do with the fact that I did it, because the whole drive back asleep, and then sitting there with Margie, and then walking down here, the whole time, part of me has been waiting for the feeling you're supposed to get when you win. The feeling. The feeling. The big one. The one in the movies. I won. He lied. I told the truth. The truth was better than the lie. The lie is crumbling. That's the shape of the thing I'm supposed to feel. And I don't feel it. I feel tired. I feel like I want to sit on this couch. I don't feel vindicated. I don't feel triumphant. I don't feel anything I'm supposed to feel, and I don't understand." Caleb chewed his cookie. He took his time about it. "Maybe it's not that kind of thing." "What do you mean?" "Maybe winning isn't a feeling. Maybe it's just a quiet. You got the lie off your chest. There's not supposed to be a parade after. There's just what you're doing, which is sitting on a couch, eating a stolen cookie. That's a very unromantic view of winning. I'm a carpenter. I'm a very unromantic person." "You are not a very unromantic person, Caleb Morgan." He didn't answer that. He ate his cookie. She ate hers. The silence in the cabin was comfortable in a way that silences between strangers were not usually comfortable. And Caleb had the fleeting, uninvited thought that the two of them had skipped a large number of standard human steps somewhere in the last 5 days, and that neither of them had noticed until this cookie. "Caleb, yeah. I'm going to say something, and I'm going to need you to let me finish, okay?" She set the cookie down on the dish towel. She put her hands on her knees. She looked at them. "I have to go to Chicago on Monday. Theodore needs me in the office. There's a deposition Tuesday morning. There's a board meeting Tuesday afternoon. There's a lot of things. I'll be gone 3, maybe 4 days. Priya's coming to pick me up. She's driving down Monday morning." "Okay. I'm not running away." "I didn't think you were running away." I want to say the next part out loud, because if I don't say it, I'm going to think it for 3 days in Chicago, and I'm going to convince myself I made it up in my head. And I'm tired of being the kind of person who doesn't say things. I've been that person my whole life, and it cost me a wedding and 3 years of therapy and a fiancé who mistook my politeness for permission, and I am done being that person. So I'm going to say it once, plainly, in your house, and then I'm going to go back to mine, and you don't have to say anything back right now. You don't have to say anything back ever, if you don't want to. Is that okay?" "That's okay." She took a breath. "I am not the same person I was on Wednesday," she said. "I don't know who I am yet. I have some idea. But I know one thing for sure, and the thing I know is that part of whatever I'm becoming, it happened on a porch, and it happened in a kitchen, and it happened on a torn-up deck, and it happened in the passenger seat of a truck that rattles. And the person those things happened with is sitting 4 feet away from me right now. And I'm not confused about it. I'm not. And I wanted you to know. Caleb was very still. I am not asking you for anything, she said. I am not asking you to. I know what your life looks like. I know what Oliver's life looks like. I'm not going to make a mess of it. I don't want to make a mess of it. I'm going to Chicago on Monday, and I'm going to do the work I have to do, and then I'm going to come back out here, and I'm going to keep handing you a pry bar when you ask for a pry bar, and I'm going to eat whatever Margie puts in front of me. And we're going to go at whatever speed is the right speed for a 6-year-old and a man who has been doing things alone for a long time. And that's the offer, the whole offer. You can sit with it for as long as you need to. I'm not going anywhere. I mean, I'm going to Chicago, but I'm not going anywhere. She stopped. Okay, she said. That's it. Caleb looked at her for what felt to him like a very long time and was really about 4 seconds. Then he reached over and took her hand. He didn't hold it in a way he would have held Hannah's hand, because Hannah was a different hand and a different life, and there were rules to both. And Hannah had been dead for 5 years, and he was not going to insult her memory by pretending his hand was the same. He held Isla's hand like it was Isla's hand. He felt the bitten nails, and the splinter he knew was still in the base of her right thumb from Thursday morning. The one she hadn't let him pull out because Margie had been making a joke at the time, and she hadn't wanted to ruin the joke. He held her hand for about 10 seconds. Then he let it go. I heard you, he said. Okay. I heard every word. Okay. I'm not gonna give you a speech back, Isla. I'm not built for the speech. What I'm going to tell you is that I haven't slept a full night since Wednesday either, and I'm not confused about why. And when you get back from Chicago on Thursday or Friday or whatever day it turns out to be, the porch light's going to be on, and the coffee's going to be made, and my kid is going to be waiting by the window because he's already told me twice today that you're his friend now. And he doesn't say that word about a lot of people. That's what I've got for you. That's the whole thing. She didn't answer. She reached up with the hand he had just let go of, and she touched the corner of her own eye with her knuckle, and then she looked at the knuckle and was mildly surprised that it was wet. Huh, she said. Yeah. I wasn't going to do that. Nobody ever is. Caleb. Yeah. I'm going to go home now. Okay. If I don't go home now, I'm going to sit on this couch until morning, and your son is going to wake up and find us, and I don't want him to find us. Go home. She stood up. She pulled the jacket, still her father's jacket, still too big, tighter around herself. She walked to the screen door. She stopped with her hand on it. I'll see you tomorrow. You'll see me tomorrow. The screen door hissed shut behind her, and Caleb sat on the couch and looked at 5 cookies on a dish towel and one empty spot where a 6th cookie had been. And he did not move for a long time. Somewhere in the back of the cabin, Oliver rolled over in his sleep and said something that was not a word in any language, and then went still again, and the loon on the lake made its noise, and Caleb thought, with a clarity that surprised him, it's Saturday night and I'm alive, and I don't know what Monday is going to ask of me, but whatever it is, it's going to find me in a different house than the one I walked in on Thursday. He picked up a cookie. He ate it slowly. He folded the dish towel and carried it into the kitchen and set it on the counter, and he went to bed, and he slept for 7 hours, which was the longest stretch of sleep he had had since his son was an infant. Sunday was quiet. Isla came out to the deck at 9 and handed him things until 11 and did not talk much. And he did not push her, because he knew from his own life that the day after a big honesty was usually a day where a person had to sit inside their own body and get used to it again. At noon, Margie brought out sandwiches, and the 3 of them sat with their feet over the edge like they had on Thursday. And this time Oliver climbed into Isla's lap instead of Caleb's. And Isla froze for 1/2 second the way a person freezes when something very precious is handed to them without warning. And then she put her arm around Oliver without looking at Caleb, and Oliver ate half her sandwich, and none of this was commented on by any of the adults present. On Sunday night, Caleb finished the framing on the new ledger board, which meant the hardest structural part of the job was done, and he stood on the good half of the deck in the last light of the day and looked at his work, and he felt the small, clean satisfaction that good joinery gave him. And he thought that it was not a very big thing in the larger scheme of things to have straightened a ledger board on a lake house, but that it was, at least, a true thing, and that true things were what he had been living on for 5 years, and that they seemed to still be in stock. Isla's car came at 7:40 on Monday morning. Priya drove it up in the rain. She got out and hugged Isla at the back steps of the big house, and took Isla's overnight bag out of her hand and put it in the trunk, and then stood on the gravel with her arms crossed and her sunglasses pushed up on her head, waiting. She was a polite, efficient person. She was giving Isla a minute. Isla walked down to the guest house. Caleb was at the porch railing with his coffee. Oliver was at his feet with a book. "I'll be back Thursday." "Okay." "Maybe Friday." "Okay." "Don't let Margie eat all the cookies." "I won't." Oliver. "Yeah." "Take care of your dad." "Okay." "And Mr. Pete?" "Obviously." She laughed. She put her hand on the rail next to his, but did not touch his hand. She looked at him. He looked back. "Drive safe," he said. "You too." "I'm not going anywhere." "Right." "Isla." "Yeah, I'll see you Thursday, or Friday, or whenever." "Whenever." She walked back up the path and she got into the car, and Priya drove her out past the cedar plaque, and Caleb and Oliver and Biscuit stood at the railing and watched the taillights go until they couldn't anymore. "Dad?" "Yeah, bud." "She's coming back, right?" "She's coming back." "Are you sure?" He was quiet for a second. "I'm sure." "Okay." "Go get your boots." "Why?" "Because the new boards came and we're going to start laying them, and you are going to hand me nails." "Can I use the hammer?" "No." "Can I use the—" "No." "What can I use?" "You can use your hands, and when I say nail, you put a nail in my hand, and that's the job." "That's a boring job." "That's the job." Oliver went to get his boots. Caleb stood at the rail a minute longer. The rain was easing up. The lake was coming out of the mist. Somewhere up the path, Margie was opening the windows of the big house to let Sunday out and Monday in, and somewhere an hour and a half south of him, a black car was merging onto an interstate carrying a woman he had known, as of this morning, for less than a week. A week was a very short time. A week was long enough. He picked up his tool belt and buckled it around his waist, and he went to meet his son on the lawn, and the two of them walked together through the wet grass toward a deck that was no longer falling into the lake, that was, as of that morning, level and square and holding, and that was going to be by Thursday or Friday or whenever, 1/3 of the way toward finished. He started work. Out in the world, far from Harlow Lake, a man in a different city woke up in a hotel room to the news that a Bloomberg retraction had become a full-page correction, that a podcast host named Shaw had been served with a letter from Castellano Wright and Pham at 6:30 in the morning, and that the phrase "she lied to the board, she lied to me, she was going to lie to the acquirers" was now surrounded, on every screen on which it had lived, by a small, precise, devastating set of citations proving that each clause was not in fact true. He tried to call 3 investors. 2 of them did not pick up. The third picked up and listened for 30 seconds and said, "David, I have to go," and hung up, and did not call him back, and would not, for the rest of his professional life, return his calls. The man sat in the hotel room in a bathrobe and looked at his phone and did not for a while understand what had happened to him. What had happened to him was that a carpenter in Wisconsin had driven a woman to Madison in the rain in a truck that rattled, and the woman had said a sentence out loud into a microphone, and the sentence had traveled. Caleb did not know any of this on Monday morning, on the deck. He was teaching his son how to hand a man a nail. "Point first," he said. "Like this. Other way. Like this. That's it." "Why?" "So I don't stab my hand on the point." "Oh, right. Dad." "Yeah. When she comes back, can we have pot roast again?" Caleb drove the nail. He set the next one. He looked down at his son, who was holding up the next nail exactly the right way. Point first, handle toward the grip, the way the son of a carpenter is eventually going to know to hand up a nail without being told. "Yeah, bud," he said. "When she comes back, we can have pot roast again." "Okay." "Okay." The sun came a little further out. The loon was quiet. The new board smelled like pine. Caleb Morgan worked through the morning on a deck he had been paid to fix for a woman he had, without meaning to, begun to love. And he did not call it that yet, even in the part of his own mind where he told himself the truth, because there were some words you didn't use on a thing until you were sure the thing was going to stand up under them. The word could wait. The thing was already there. He didn't need to name it to know what it was. And somewhere past the cattle guard, heading south on a wet gray road, a woman in a black car was closing her eyes against the window and thinking, for the first time in her adult life, about what she wanted, instead of what she had been told to want, and finding, to her enormous and complicated relief, that the answer was not a title, not a valuation, not a rooftop, not a ring, but a porch light, and a boy with a stuffed fox, and a man who measured pancakes. She was going to Chicago to end one life. She did not know, yet, whether she had the nerve to start the other one. But she was going to find out. She opened her eyes and watched the road. She came back on a Friday. 4 days in Chicago had done what 4 days in Chicago do to a person who has something to finish. The deposition went long. The board voted the way boards vote when the numbers on the page are better than the story in the papers. Theodore Castellano, who did not smile as a rule, walked her to the elevator on Thursday evening and told her, without looking at her, that in 31 years of practice he had not seen a client go from the defendant's chair to the driver's seat as fast as she had, and then he said goodnight and went back to his office, and she rode the elevator down alone and did not cry, because she had, somewhere in the last 10 days, run out of the crying that had belonged to the old version of her life. She slept 4 hours in her apartment on North Orleans. She packed a single bag. She looked at the engagement ring for the first time since Tuesday the week before, sitting in a dish on the counter where she had put it the night she had gotten on the road to Harlow Lake. And she picked it up and dropped it into a padded envelope that she would mail back on Monday without a note, because there was nothing left to say that was worth the postage of saying. Priya drove her out again Friday morning. They barely talked. Priya, who had known Isla since a freshman seminar on game theory 11 years ago, had finally stopped asking questions somewhere around Rockford. "Just tell me one thing," Priya said as they turned off the interstate. "Okay? Is he kind?" Isla looked out the window at the trees going past. "He's kind," she said. "He's also a little stubborn, and he measures pancakes with a ruler. And he has a son who gave me his only stuffed animal when I was sitting on a porch falling apart. And he does not care that he does not care about any of the things I used to think I was. He sees what's actually there. Is what's actually there good? I don't know yet. I think so." "Okay." "Priya." "Yeah. That's enough of a reason, isn't it?" Priya was quiet for a while. "Yeah," she said finally. "That's enough of a reason." The car came up the Cedar Plaque Drive at 10:30. Caleb was on the deck. He saw the car come through the trees, and he did not stand up right away because he did not want to be the kind of man who stood up right away. But Oliver was not a man and had no such scruples, and Oliver was off the deck and across the lawn before the car had stopped moving. She got out. Oliver hit her at the waist, and she went down on one knee in the gravel and put both arms around him, and Caleb, watching from 30 yards away, felt something inside his chest shift a quarter inch and stay there, and he knew, the way he had known about Hannah once, in a different life, on a different afternoon, that the quarter inch was not going to shift back. He walked over. She stood up with Oliver on her hip. She looked at Caleb across the gravel, and the space between them was maybe 6 feet and also maybe nothing, and she said, "Hi. I'm back. I see that. Did you miss me?" "The dog missed you." "Caleb?" "Yeah, I missed you." She laughed. He laughed. Oliver laughed because the adults were laughing and because he was 6 and because laughing was cheap. Priya, behind the wheel, watched them for about 4 seconds and then, without fanfare, started the engine and backed out of the drive because Priya was, as Isla had said, a good one. They did not talk about what was going to happen next that morning. They did not talk about it that night either, or the next morning. They did not talk about it as a plan, as a decision, as a thing with a date. They just began to live it. Isla stayed in the big house. Caleb stayed in the guest house. She came down for dinner. He went up for coffee. Oliver went wherever he wanted, which was, increasingly, wherever Isla was. The deck got finished in the second week of October. Isla drove the last nail, under Caleb's hand on her shoulder, and Oliver cheered, and Margie took a picture on her phone that she would later, quietly, frame and give to them the following Christmas without a word. Isla sold the CEO role eventually to Finn at a valuation that made her board weep and her accountant call her 3 times in a single afternoon. She did not retire. She was 29. She started small, An advisory practice, 2 days a week, mostly remote, mostly for female founders who reminded her of who she had been at 23. She kept the lake house. She bought the 3 acres next to it. Caleb kept his shop in Madison. They did not rush. They gave it a year, and then another one, and Oliver turned 7 and then 8, and somewhere in there he stopped calling her the lady and started calling her Is, which he had made up himself, and which she did not correct because she had never, in her entire life, had a nickname from a person who loved her. They married on the deck on a Saturday in June, the 3rd summer, with 41 people and 1 dog and a caterer from Madison who cried during the toasts. Oliver walked her down the aisle of planks they had rebuilt together. There were no speeches about fate. There were no speeches about destiny. Caleb said, at the end of his vows, in a voice that cracked only once, "I spent 5 years thinking the best part of my life was behind me. I was wrong about that. I'm grateful to be wrong." Isla said, "I thought being strong meant not needing anyone. I had that exactly backwards. Thank you for letting me be tired in your house." Margie cried through all of it. Biscuit slept. The deck is still there. The deck is still there, and every board of it was laid by one of the 3 of them. Mostly Caleb, some by Isla, a handful by a small boy standing on an overturned bucket with a hammer too big for his hands. And every spring Caleb checks the joist hangers on the west side, because he is a careful man, and careful is different from slow. That is the whole story. The truth of it, the part that matters, is not that 2 fractured people found each other at a lake house in Wisconsin. The truth is smaller than that. The truth is that they found each other on a porch step, in a kitchen, over a pot roast, in a truck that rattled, over a stolen cookie, in the 4 seconds it takes to hand another human being a pry bar without saying a word. Big lives do not usually turn on big moments. They turn on small ones, done honestly, in rooms where nobody is performing. A man who has shut a lot of doors can open one. A woman who has been told her whole life to be strong can, in the right room, let herself be tired. A 6-year-old boy with a stuffed fox can, without knowing it, hand a stranger the first piece of a second life. Real love does not arrive with music swelling. It arrives with a dish towel on your shoulder and a splinter in your thumb, and somebody across the table who noticed that you ate. That is what Caleb Morgan and Isla Bennett figured out, in the fall of one year and the spring of the next, on a lake nobody famous has ever heard of. They figured it out the way most people figure out the things that save them, late, imperfectly, and with a lot of help. And it held.